Brian Stahl, tell us why you're running for Congress.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. I've been a law enforcement officer for almost 21 years now. I started my career actually in Irving, Texas back in 2005, did 10 years with them, and then came to Fort Worth where I currently am. So I'm very familiar with actually serving the community and District 6. I've lived in and or served this district for almost 21 years now, and something that is near and dear to my heart is public service. And it's one of those things where, I got into politics about a year and a half ago as a city council member, and I'm currently the mayor. And I found out that serving the community through, in that world, in that realm, is just as impactful. And it's something that I really, truly fell in love with. And it's a service on another level. And compared to wearing a badge and going out there and helping people in times of need, being able to serve the community as a community leader and as the mayor is something that has been a godsend, and I've really embraced and really thoroughly enjoyed. And I started looking at the leadership that we had, especially the representation that we had in Washington, and I realized that we could do a heck of a lot more and a heck of a lot better. And I started talking to some people, and one of the biggest things for me is constituent services, and that's something that we're severely lacking currently. And it's just there's a large disconnect between the representation that we currently have and the people who are actually out there living within our district and having to deal with certain issues that are going unheard, and they feel like they're forgotten. And I want to change that.
Okay, so tell us about that, your contrast with the incumbent, because this is a primary race. It's in a redrawn district. It's now most of Irving. And so the incumbent has to introduce himself to a number of voters in Irving. So tell us about yourself and your contrast with the incumbent.
The biggest thing, there's two things that I think really set me apart from the incumbent. And I mentioned one, and it's the one that is extremely important to me, is constituent services. The only way I know to serve people, especially through my 21 year of law enforcement career, which I'm currently actively still doing, is actually going out and being with the people and for the people and amongst the people. You have to go into these communities. You have to do live town halls. You have to go to community events. You have to answer the tough questions in person and not have just a digital town hall once every month or two, and think that that's sufficient representation for the members of your district. So actually going to events and meeting people and being amongst them is something that I think that we really need. And I'm hearing it all the time on the campaign trail, that there's such a lack of connection. There's such a lack of availability with the current member that's representing us. And that's something that I want to bridge, because people really truly feel like their voice is going unheard, and that they elected this person to go to Washington to represent them, but that he has no idea what they actually want or what they actually need. That's first of all. Second of all, another big thing that I'm hearing is all this outrageous government spending. The incumbents never voted down a spending bill. They had a vote a few nights ago on the Ned bill, and it was something that allows the United States to send over $300 million to foreign governments, and a bill that was actually frozen by President Trump when he came into office. So they froze that spending. So the Republican Party, Eli Crane, he introduced a bill to basically eliminate it. Let's get rid of it. The president froze it. Let's get rid of it. We can cut that waste. We don't need to spend $300 million plus dollars overseas for experimental projects when we could use it here in the United States. And the current member our current representative actually voted with the Democrats a few nights ago. He voted to keep that bill on the books. So he wants to keep sending money overseas. He wants to keep funding foreign projects and foreign wars and foreign experimental projects and governments. And I'm absolutely against that. I will not be an automatic yes on every single spending bill, especially if it doesn't really truly benefit the United States and Texas and District 6.
Great. Thank you for that. Now, what about immigration? So there's obviously a lot of discussion about President Trump's immigration enforcement, as well as a lot of recent outrage in Irving over the H-1B situation. So what's your opinion on that, and companies, shifting towards domestic labor rather than constantly using foreign labor?
Well, the biggest thing is we had such an influx of illegal immigration over the last administration. We had over 13 million people. Some of the stats that I'm getting, I don't think we really know. I don't think we really know how many people actually came across the border. They came across unvetted, unchecked, and undocumented. And I think what President Trump is doing, trying to wrangle some of that in is a positive thing. But I think that there should be a more clear directive on who we should be going after. I think we need to be going after, the known, violent gang members and murderers and rapists and drug traffickers and human traffickers. I think that we need to be focusing on them first and foremost. Not every single person that comes to the United States is a criminal. And, immigration is something that is woven into the fabric of this country. And I think that there is a lot of immigrants out there that are actually wanting to come here to better themselves, and that they want a chance at the American dream, and they want to be able to provide for their family. And they are, for the most part, since they've gotten here, been law-abiding citizens. They work, they pay taxes, their children go to school. They're intertwined into the community, and I don't think those are the people that we necessarily need to be focused on when we're talking about, deporting every single illegal immigrant. Now, how do we fix it? The biggest thing is I think we need to streamline the policies that we have to allow for people to become United States citizens. It's ridiculous the amount of money and the time it takes, sometimes up to a decade for somebody who's come here seeking citizenship, who's pledged allegiance to the United States, who is a law-abiding citizen, who does pay taxes, and somebody who wants to raise a family here and just be productive. They're stuck in the system because it's so congested and convoluted with all these other problems that we're seeing, with the mass amounts of immigration that came across the border under the last administration. So, that's a couple of things that, are hot topics. And I think if we streamline it and we allow the people that are actually wanting to be productive members an easier pathway, it would clear up a lot of channels, and we can start focusing on the people that we really need to focus on.
Okay, thank you. Election security is an issue. Irving is in Dallas County. The Republican Party in Dallas County recently attempted to go to paper ballots hand counted for this primary. They were not able to pull it off, but I don't know if you have views on election security.
I do. I mean, election security is extremely important to me. It's one of the things that makes America America, right? One person gets one voice and one vote, and I think that's the biggest thing. You see it out in other states, especially out in California. I know some people out there. I've talked to some representatives out there, and they've heard from their constituents and people on the campaign trail that they're currently engaging with, that people actually brag about the fact that they're able to go and vote 6 and 7 times in one day. With no ID, there's no checks and balances, there's nothing to stop them, and they literally have told the people that I've been in contact with out there that they're bragging about it. My vote's worth 7 votes because I just go to 7 different polling locations during early voting or on election day, and I get to cast my vote 7 times. So election integrity and security is something that's very important. We need to keep that in order to maintain what we have and what made America what it is. And I believe you should have to show ID in order to vote. You have to show ID for 100 other different things. And I know that Texas is really good about that, but in the grand scheme of things, nationwide, I think it's a slippery slope that we're on, and it's going to end up, it's going to come back and it's going to really harm us, especially after 2030, when we have the new census and all these numbers and all these maps get redrawn again. I think it's going to shake up a lot of things. And I think that, what Dallas County is trying to do was great. I know it didn't work out, but I fully support that.
Okay, thank you. Shifting now to cost of living. So Irving skews younger, actually, and the rise in cost of living makes affordable family formation very difficult. And we've seen over the past 2 decades a decline in birth rates. It's just difficult to start life, start a family. Why? Because of the costs of housing, healthcare, and higher education. These are all things that the federal government subsidizes a lot of money for, and yet the prices keep going up. So are there thoughts on cost of living, on subsidizing higher education, which, has kind of turned leftward, or a substitute for Obamacare when it comes to healthcare?
Yeah, that's kind of a really deep question right there. When you talk about inflation, there's a couple of things that you have to think about. The cost of production for things, how much does it cost to build things, and then the demand of things, and then the policies that affect those things, right? So when you talk about inflation and inflation going up, it's the cost of goods and services that are increased because of those 3 things, right? How much does it cost to make it? How much, or what policies are in place and then the demand on said things. And you see it in the housing market all the time. You know, when it costs X amount of dollars to import wood from Canada, and that goes through the roof, well, it's going to increase prices. You know, now the policies that are tied to that, I think that the federal government needs to kind of get out of the way. You know, there is so much regulations that are put in place, usually by a Democratic president, that really affects the cost of things. And I think that if we cut a lot of red tape and we allowed companies, you know, to actually function the way that they were designed to function and serve the people of those communities, then it would drive the price of things down. Now, when you talk about health insurance, there's a couple of things that, you know, I think are detrimental to what we currently have. You know, the biggest thing that I see when it comes to insurance is we're not able to shop for health insurance across state lines. I think we need to open it up. It'll make it extremely more competitive. It needs to be like car insurance. It'll make it extremely more competitive. It'll allow families to actually pick the policy and pick the company that they want, that they see fit for their family, what they can afford, and the coverage that they're looking for, instead of being forced into something, whether it's through their employer or through the state that they live in. Another thing is, I think we need transparency when it comes to prescription costs, and we need transparency and accountability when it comes to the cost of procedures. You know, I said it again at an event that I was at the other night. You know, how many times have people gone to the doctor and they were there for, or the hospital, they were there for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and they get a bill for $7,700. And really all they got was like a cold wrap and an Advil. I mean, come on. You know, the kickbacks that are happening, whether it's through big pharma or through doctors who are incentivized to provide treatment and prescribe drugs to people, need to stop. And that's something that the government is heavily involved in. And that's something that I really want to try to tackle, because I think it would drive down the cost of insurance significantly.
Okay, thank you. So a question about your thoughts on the National Republican Party and if there's any disagreements there. I mean, in Irving this past year, the big issue, even though gambling is not legal, casino gambling is not legal in Texas, there was a push to put what was basically the world's largest casino in Irving by the Sands Corporation, which is Miriam Adelson, who is Donald Trump's top donor. So is there anywhere you see where you have disagreements with the National Party and where they want to take the country versus the people in this district?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously, you know, I'm not going to be a yes man. I'm not going to go to Washington and just you know, bow down to the establishment. That I don't think that is a proper way to represent the people, and I know that's not what they want. So, you know, are there things that I don't agree with when it comes to the Republican Party? Sure. You know, I mentioned the vote the other night with the Ned bill, and, you know, the current congressman that we have right now, he wasn't the only Republican that voted to keep that bill alive. You know, so there's several members that are, you know, they're, for whatever reason, they're voting to continue to send money overseas, and I'm sure it has a lot to do with, you know, who they're tied to or who they're connected with, and I don't agree with that. You know, the casino thing is something that's totally different. You know, I think you go up to WinStar and you go drive through the parking lot, and 99% of the license plates you see are from where? They're from Texas, right? So Texans are going up there, and they enjoy, you know, visiting WinStar. They enjoy gambling a little bit, or whatever the case may be, seeing a concert or something, and that's great. You know, bringing that, keeping that money, keeping those taxes, and keeping all of that inside the state is something that I think we really need to look at. You know, I heard that same thing that, you know, the Sands Club wanted to build the biggest casino in Irving, and I know that in Fort Worth, where I currently work, you know, they were cutting out a large chunk of property on the Trinity River to build a casino as well. So it's something that I think every major city in Texas was hoping would happen and hoping would pass, and the amount of money and taxes and jobs that would bring would be, you know, significant, especially for our district. The amount of jobs that would bring to our district if we had a casino like that would be huge, I think.
Great. Okay, thank you for that. Last question for you. It's just politically how you see this race and what the path to victory is. It's very difficult to beat an incumbent. The district has changed. What is your strategy there to overcome what is a very difficult task politically?
Yeah, so the district did change. We lost a couple of rural counties. We have such a beautiful district, though. I really truly mean that. I think we're one of the most unique districts in Texas because the southern portion of our district is all rural. So we have farmland, we have ranches, we have small towns of 100 people, and then the further north you get, you start getting into Burleson, you get into Fort Worth, Arlington, Irving. Obviously, that's urban, significantly different with different needs and different wants for what they consider to be good representation in Washington. So one of the things that I really pride myself on is the fact that we are really building a strong campaign around the people within the district. We're going to many events, we're making contact with people, and we're actually showing them that we care and we want to be a part of the community. We want to be intertwined with everything that they're doing, and we want to truly represent them. And the only way to do that is by being amongst them and with them. And you have to be available for them, right? You have to do that. So the ground game, the grassroots is something that is, very important to us, and we take it very, very serious. Also, I've never taken a dollar from anybody that came from a big corporation or, any group or any entity. Every dollar that I've earned for my campaign has come from meeting people, calling people, engaging with people, being amongst the people, and earning their support, earning their respect. And we're gaining significant momentum right now, and I really think that we have an outstanding shot. I know we're gonna win in March, and I'm very happy about it. And it's because of the things that they feel like they aren't getting that I'm currently giving them right now, and they really appreciate it.
Excellent. Brian Stahl, thanks for the time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.